The Verisian delegate, Zintrak, rose from his seat with the grace of a predator. His scaled, serpentine body coiled slightly as he surveyed the assembly, his golden eyes glinting with malice. "We must address the human question," he began, his voice smooth yet venomous. "Their reluctance to engage in conflict, their persistent appeals for diplomacy, it reeks of fear, does it not?" He allowed the question to hang in the air as murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Arthur's jaw tightened imperceptibly, but he remained silent. Years of training had taught him that silence, when timed correctly, could be as deafening as a shout. Beside him, Patrick Jones shifted uneasily, the young aide's fingers twitching as if itching to interrupt. Arthur shot him a quick glance, and Patrick immediately stilled, his pale face betraying his tension. "Fear," Zintrak repeated, savoring the word as if it were a delicacy. "Humanity's history may be one of conflict, but their actions since joining this council have been lackluster. They lack the courage to act decisively, to wield power as true sovereigns of the stars." The room erupted in a mix of laughter and derision. Delegates of the more warlike species, those who thrived on conquest and bloodshed, nodded in approval. Others, though quieter, exchanged skeptical glances. Arthur finally moved, stepping forward onto the central platform. The subtle shift in his posture demanded attention. He adjusted his cuffs with deliberate precision, his eyes scanning the assembly with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the bravado and pomp. "Delegate Zintrak," Arthur began, his voice calm, but carrying an edge sharp enough to cut. "It's fascinating how much time you spend speculating on what humanity fears, yet you've spared no thought on what we've endured, or what we're capable of." The chamber grew silent, the laughter dying instantly. Arthur's words were measured, but the weight behind them was undeniable. Zintrak's smirk faltered for a moment before he recovered. "A bold claim, human," he sneered, though his tone lacked the conviction it held moments before. "But words are cheap, and your species has shown little else but those." Arthur's lips twitched, not quite forming a smile. "Words, Delegate Zintrak, are the tools of those who understand that strength is not measured solely by the ability to destroy. But perhaps that's a concept unfamiliar to you." Patrick's breath caught in his throat. The chamber, already tense, seemed to contract as if the air itself was holding its breath. Zintrak's scales rippled, a subtle display of agitation that did not go unnoticed by the other delegates. "Are you suggesting humans possess strength that we, the Varaxians, cannot comprehend?" Arthur stepped closer to the platform's edge, his voice dropping just enough that the delegates leaned in to catch his words. "I'm not suggesting anything, Delegate. I'm stating a fact. You mock us for our restraint, for our decision to seek peace rather than conquest. But history has shown that those who mistake mercy for weakness often regret it." The silence was deafening now. Even the more indifferent species watched with rapt attention. Arthur's reputation had preceded him, but seeing the legendary diplomat in action was a different experience altogether. Zintrak opened his mouth to retort, but before he could, Arthur continued, his tone colder than the void between stars. "You speak of fear, Delegate. Tell me, what do you know of it? Have you ever stood in a trench as the air turned to fire? Have you ever held the line against enemies who outnumbered you 10-1? Humanity doesn't fear war. We are war. We've simply chosen not to bring it to your doorstep." Yet, a ripple of unease spread through the assembly. Even the more aggressive delegates seemed to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Patrick, standing just behind Arthur, couldn't help but marvel at the transformation. This was a side of his mentor he had only heard about in hushed stories, the warrior hidden beneath the diplomat's polished surface. Victor Vance, seated discreetly among the human delegation, gave a barely perceptible nod. The military liaison had always believed that Arthur's presence on the council was not just a matter of diplomacy, but a quiet warning. Now, that warning was being broadcast loud and clear. Zintrak's voice, though still sharp, carried an edge of uncertainty. "If humanity truly possesses such strength, Why not display it? Why hide behind treaties and words? Arthur tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question. Because the greatest power lies in knowing when to use it, and when not to. He paused, letting the words sink in. But if you insist on testing us, Delegate, I assure you, we won't hesitate to remind the galaxy why humanity is still standing while others have fallen. The chamber was utterly still, the tension almost unbearable. For a moment, it seemed as though Zintrak might lunge at Arthur, his coils tightening in visible frustration. But then, as if sensing the shifting mood of the room, the Verisian stepped back, his expression carefully neutral. Arthur turned, his gaze sweeping over the assembly. Earth has always sought peace, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Yet if pushed, we will do what must be done. You would do well to remember that. With that, he stepped down from the platform, his measured stride echoing through the hushed chamber. Patrick followed, his face a mixture of awe and apprehension. As they exited the chamber, Victor joined them, his gruff voice breaking the silence. You just painted a target on Earth's back, Morgan. Arthur didn't break stride. Good, he replied, his voice steady. Let them aim. It'll remind them what they're dealing with. Behind them, the chamber erupted into a flurry of activity, the echoes of Arthur's words reverberating far beyond the crystalline walls. The shuttle's hum was steady, a faint backdrop to the tense silence that filled the cabin. Arthur Morgan sat with his arms crossed, his face unreadable as the lights of the council's capital city streaked past the windows. Patrick Jones, seated across from him, fidgeted with a datapad, unable to contain his restlessness. The young aide finally looked up, his voice breaking the quiet. You really rattled them back there, Patrick said, trying to sound casual but failing to hide the edge in his tone. Arthur didn't respond immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the window, watching the alien skyline shift and shimmer. The truth tends to do that, he replied finally, his voice low and steady. Patrick set the datapad down, leaning forward. But was it the right move? Zintrak looked ready to start a war on the spot. Arthur turned his gaze to the younger man, his expression softening slightly. Zintrak was never going to leave that chamber satisfied, no matter what I said. People like him, those who thrive on power and intimidation, they see restraint as an opportunity, not a boundary. He paused, his eyes narrowing. That's why you have to show them the cost of crossing the line. Patrick leaned back, processing the words. It wasn't the answer he'd hoped for, but deep down he couldn't deny its weight. Arthur wasn't just a diplomat. He was a man forged in the crucible of conflict. The shuttle docked with a gentle jolt, and the hatch hissed open. Victor Vance stood waiting at the end of the ramp, his broad shoulders and weathered face a stark contrast to the polished metal walls of the docking bay. He fell into step beside Arthur without a word, his heavy boots echoing in the sterile corridor. Good speech, Victor said after a moment, his tone gruff but approving. You had half the council ready to crawl under their desks. That wasn't the goal, Arthur replied, his voice carrying a hint of weariness. No, Victor agreed, but it was effective. The question is, what's your next move? Arthur glanced at him, the corner of his mouth twitching in a faint smirk. We make sure Zintrak doesn't get his next move. They entered a secure briefing room, where Liam Grayson was already waiting. The intelligence officer was wiry and sharp-eyed, his fingers tapping a rapid rhythm on the edge of the table. He straightened as they entered, his expression grim. We've got a problem, Liam said without preamble. He slid a datapad across the table, the screen displaying intercepted communications. Zintrak's been busy. He's rallying support from the more aggressive factions, painting humanity as a threat that needs to be neutralized. Victor let out a low growl, his hand instinctively brushing the sidearm holstered at his hip. Typical Verisian playbook. Stir up fear, then strike before anyone can organize a response. Arthur picked up the datapad, scanning the data with practiced efficiency. And the council? Liam shook his head. Divided, as always. Some of the more rational species are pushing back, but others are starting to listen to Zintrak. If he gains enough traction, we could be looking at sanctions. Or worse. Patrick, who had been standing near the door, spoke up, his voice tinged with disbelief. How can they not see through him? He's blatantly trying to provoke us. Arthur set the datapad down, meeting Patrick's gaze. Because fear is a powerful tool. Zintrak knows how to wield it, and right now, humanity is an easy target. We've spent years avoiding conflict, and now they think we're incapable of it. Victor folded his arms, his expression hard. So, what's the play? We can't just let him keep building momentum. Arthur leaned back in his chair, his mind working through the possibilities. We need to shift the narrative. Show the Council that Zintrak's the one destabilizing the galaxy, not us. Liam raised an eyebrow. And how do you propose we do that? Arthur's lips pressed into a thin line. We expose him. If he's rallying support, he's leaving a trail. Find it, and we'll make sure the Council sees it. Liam nodded, already reaching for his datapad. I'll start digging. As the meeting broke up, Patrick lingered behind, his expression troubled. Arthur, he said quietly, do you ever think maybe we've chosen the wrong path? That our insistence on peace has only made things worse? Arthur paused, his hand on the doorframe. He turned, his gaze steady. It's not the path that's wrong, Patrick. It's the people who refuse to walk it with us. But that doesn't mean we abandon it. It means we hold it even tighter. Patrick nodded slowly, though doubt still flickered in his eyes. Later, in the quiet of his quarters, Arthur sat alone, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. The weight of the day pressed heavily on his shoulders, but his mind was elsewhere, lost in memories he rarely allowed himself to revisit. He saw the faces of those he had fought beside, the ones who hadn't made it back. He remembered the screams, the chaos, the fire that had consumed entire cities. And he remembered the moment he'd made his decision. To fight not for conquest, but for the chance to end the cycle of destruction. The door chimed, pulling him from his thoughts. Come in, he called, his voice rough. Victor stepped inside, his expression softer than usual. He leaned against the wall, studying Arthur for a moment before speaking. You did good today, you know. Zintrak may have a louder voice right now, but you've got the truth on your side. Arthur huffed a quiet laugh. The truth doesn't always win, Victor. No, Victor admitted, but it's a damn good weapon when wielded right. And if anyone can wield it, it's you. Arthur raised his glass in a silent toast, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. Let's hope you're right. Victor nodded and left, leaving Arthur alone once more. But this time, the silence felt less heavy, the shadows less oppressive. There was still a fight ahead, but for the first time in a long while, Arthur felt the faint stirrings of hope. The intelligence report came in the dead of night, its urgency rousing Arthur Morgan from restless sleep. He was at the command center within minutes, his sharp gaze scanning the gathered team. Liam Grayson was already seated, his face illuminated by the soft glow of monitors. Victor Vance stood nearby, arms crossed, while Patrick Jones hovered anxiously, his brow furrowed in concern. What do we have? Arthur asked, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Liam didn't look up, his fingers flying over the console. We've intercepted a secure Verisien transmission. Zintrak's planning a covert operation, an attack designed to pin the blame on humanity. If it succeeds, it'll give him the leverage he needs to sway the Council entirely. Victor let out a low growl. Typical snake. What's the target? Liam hesitated, his fingers pausing mid-keystroke. A neutral colony on Arctis 9. Minimal defenses, diverse population. Perfect for creating chaos. Arthur's jaw tightened. Arctis 9 was a shining example of what the Galactic Council was supposed to represent. Cooperation among species. An attack there wouldn't just tarnish humanity's reputation. It could shatter the fragile alliances holding the galaxy together. Do we have a timeline? Arthur asked. 36 hours, Liam replied grimly. Maybe less. The room fell silent, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. Arthur paced, his mind racing. They couldn't afford to wait for the council's approval. By the time bureaucracy churned out a decision, the damage would be done. We need to stop this before it starts, Arthur said, his tone brooking no argument. Liam, can you pinpoint their staging area? Already working on it, Liam said, his fingers resuming their rapid movement. Victor stepped forward. If we're going in, we'll need a team. A small one, covert, fast, and capable. Arthur nodded. Agreed. We can't risk this escalating into open conflict. He turned to Patrick. You're with me. I need someone who can think on their feet. Patrick blinked, surprise flickering across his face before he straightened. Understood. Victor smirked. Guess that leaves me to babysit Liam. Someone's got to keep the tech genius from frying himself. Liam rolled his eyes but didn't respond, too focused on his work. Within hours, Arthur, Patrick, and a hand-picked team were aboard a sleek, unmarked vessel, hurtling through hyperspace toward the Verisian staging ground. The silence in the cabin was heavy, each man lost in his thoughts. Patrick glanced at Arthur, who was seated across from him, reviewing a tactical map on a portable console. Do you really think this will work? He asked quietly. Arthur didn't look up. It has to. If we don't act, millions could die and humanity will take the blame. Patrick hesitated. But what if we're wrong? What if we're walking into a trap? Arthur finally met his gaze, his expression calm but resolute. Then we'll deal with it. That's what we do, Patrick. We adapt, we survive, and we don't let fear dictate our actions. The younger man nodded, though doubt still lingered in his eyes. Hours later, the team arrived at a desolate moon orbiting a dying star, a perfect location for clandestine operations. The Verisian base was nestled within a deep canyon, its defenses subtle but formidable. Arthur surveyed the area through binoculars, his sharp eyes noting every turret and patrol route. They're expecting an assault, but not from us, he murmured. Victor's voice crackled over the comms. What's the play, boss? Arthur's lips curved into a faint smile. We give them what they least expect, a distraction. Within minutes, the team executed a series of precise strikes on the outer defenses, drawing the Varaxians' attention. While the enemy scrambled to respond, Arthur and Patrick slipped into the base through an unguarded maintenance hatch. The interior was a maze of narrow corridors and dim lighting, the air thick with the hum of machinery. Arthur moved with practiced ease, his footsteps silent as a shadow. Patrick followed closely, his heart pounding in his chest. They reached the control room undetected, the faint glow of monitors casting eerie patterns on the walls. Arthur gestured for Patrick to cover him as he approached the main terminal. Liam, I'm in. Arthur whispered into his comm. Talk me through this. Liam's voice crackled back, calm and precise. Look for a panel labeled Command Operations. You will need to disable their targeting systems and scramble their communications. Arthur's fingers flew over the controls, his movements swift and deliberate. The seconds stretched into an eternity as he worked, each beep of the terminal a small victory. Suddenly, an alarm blared, the shrill sound echoing through the base. Patrick cursed under his breath, his grip tightening on his weapon. We've been made, Arthur muttered, his focus unwavering. Liam, how much time do I have? Not enough, Liam replied grimly. You need to move, now. Arthur finished the last command and turned to Patrick. Let's go. They moved quickly, their path now fraught with enemy patrols. Arthur's calm efficiency guided them through the chaos, his sharp instincts keeping them one step ahead. As they approached the extraction point, a Verisian squad rounded the corner, their weapons trained on the pair. Arthur didn't hesitate, his sidearm barking once, twice, dropping two of the aliens before they could react. Patrick fired as well, his shots less precise but effective. The remaining Varaxians fell back, giving the humans a narrow window to escape. They burst into the open air just as the extraction shuttle descended, its engines roaring. Victor was at the controls, his voice booming over the comms. "Move it, you two." Arthur and Patrick sprinted up the ramp, the shuttle's hatch closing behind them as they lifted off. The Verisian base shrank in the distance, a plume of smoke marking the chaos they had left behind. Back on the command vessel, the team gathered in the debriefing room. Liam was already compiling evidence from the base's systems, his expression triumphant. "This is it," he said, holding up the datapad. Proof that Zintrak orchestrated the entire operation. Arthur nodded, his expression grim. "Get it to the council immediately. They need to see this." Patrick slumped into a chair, exhaustion etched into his features. "Do you think they'll believe us?" Arthur met his gaze, his voice steady. "They'll have to, and if they don't, we'll make them." The room fell silent, the weight of their mission settling over them. They had won this battle, but the war for humanity's future was far from over. The council chamber was in chaos, the grand hall echoing with the angry voices of dozens of alien delegates. The towering walls of shimmering crystal seemed to vibrate with the tension in the room as accusations and counterarguments flew like plasma bolts. At the center of the storm stood Arthur Morgan, calm and unmoving, his sharp gaze fixed on Zintrak, who was seated among his Verisian entourage with an air of smug defiance. Victor Vance stood to Arthur's left, his imposing presence a silent reminder of humanity's resilience. Patrick Jones, visibly tense, clutched a datapad containing the evidence they had risked everything to obtain. Liam Grayson was at the back of the room, managing a discrete array of holographic displays to ensure their message was presented with absolute precision. Zintrak rose from his seat, his voice cutting through the cacophony like a blade. "These baseless accusations are an insult to this council and a mockery of its principles. Humanity has always been a disruptive force, clinging to outdated notions of violence and aggression. Now they seek to undermine our unity with lies." His words drew murmurs of agreement from his allies, their distrust of humans palpable. Arthur waited, letting the Varaxians' rhetoric hang in the air before stepping forward. The hall fell silent as his presence commanded the attention of every being present. "With all due respect, Zintrak," Arthur began, his voice calm but edged with steel, "the only mockery here is your blatant attempt to twist the truth. You call us disruptive, yet it is your actions that threaten to tear the galaxy apart." He gestured to Patrick, who activated the datapad. A holographic projection filled the room, displaying intercepted communications, troop movements, and detailed plans for the Arctis 9 attack. The evidence was damning, a meticulous web of deceit woven by Zintrak and his faction. Gasps rippled through the chamber as the delegates took in the information. Even those who had supported Zintrak began to shift uneasily, the weight of the truth undeniable. The Verisian leader's confident facade cracked, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the room for a way to regain control. "This is fabricated," Zintrak snarled, his voice rising in desperation. "A human trick to distract us from their true agenda." Arthur stepped closer, his gaze locked on Zintrak. "You can deny it all you want, but the evidence speaks for itself. You plan to massacre innocent civilians and blame humanity for your crimes. You wanted war, Zintrak, and you were willing to sacrifice countless lives to get it." The Verisian lunged forward, his composure shattered. "You know nothing of war," he spat. "Your kind hides behind diplomacy, too weak to face the realities of power." Arthur didn't flinch. His voice dropped, cold and deliberate. "You think we fear war? You think our commitment to peace is weakness? Let me tell you something, Zintrak. Humanity has seen the horrors of war. We've lived them, survived them, and learned from them. That's why we fight for peace, because we know the cost of the alternative." The chamber fell silent, the weight of Arthur's words sinking in. Zintrak's allies exchanged uncertain glances, their confidence shaken. But Zintrak wasn't finished. With a guttural roar, he activated a hidden device, a small spherical drone that shot into the air, emitting a high-pitched whine. The chamber erupted into chaos as the drone projected a shield around the Verisian delegation, cutting them off from the rest of the room. Guards scrambled to contain the situation, but Arthur moved first. In a blur of motion, he seized a chair and hurled it at the drone. The impact disrupted its circuitry, causing the shield to flicker and collapse. Victor and Patrick were at his side instantly, weapons drawn as Zintrak's guards closed ranks. The Verisian leader sneered, his hand reaching for a concealed blade. "You think this ends here?" Zintrak hissed. "You've only delayed the inevitable." Arthur stepped forward, his voice a deadly whisper. "No, Zintrak. This ends now." Before the Verisian could react, Arthur disarmed him with a swift, precise movement, the blade clattering to the floor. Victor subdued the remaining guards while Patrick secured the drone. The chamber guards finally regained control, surrounding the Verisian delegation. Arthur turned to the council, his voice resonating with authority. "This is the face of your so-called unity," he said, gesturing to Zintrak, "a leader willing to plunge the galaxy into chaos for his own gain. We came here in peace, but make no mistake, we will not stand by while others threaten our survival. Humanity will not be your scapegoat." The delegates erupted into debate, but this time the tide had turned. Support for Zintrak crumbled as the truth of his actions became undeniable. The council called for an emergency vote, and within the hour, Zintrak was stripped of his position and taken into custody. As the chamber emptied, Victor clapped Arthur on the shoulder. "Not bad for a diplomat," he said with a rare grin. Arthur managed a faint smile, but his eyes betrayed his exhaustion. "Let's hope it's enough." Patrick approached, holding the now inert drone. "What happens now?" Arthur gazed at the vast, star-filled window at the chamber's far end. "Now we rebuild. We repair the damage Zintrak caused, and ensure it doesn't happen again." Victor chuckled. "And if someone else tries?" Arthur's expression hardened, a glint of steel in his eyes. "Then they'll learn, as Zintrak did, that humanity is not to be underestimated." The three men stood together, a united front against the challenges ahead. The stars beyond the window seemed to burn brighter, a silent testament to the resilience and determination of a species that refused to bow to fear. For humanity, the battle was never just about survival. It was about proving that their commitment to peace was not a sign of weakness, but a testament to their strength. And as long as there were those who threatened that peace, Arthur Morgan and his team would be there to defend it.